Today on CityCast Boise, we're examining what happened to the downtown YMCA project and why so much of it has been abandoned. Will it be the next Boise Hole? And we're looking at what can only be weaponized incompetence of the Attorney General's office in one of the state's abortion ban cases. Plus, we've got some subversive and holiday cheer picks of the week. It's Friday, November 15th. I'm Lindsay Van Allen, and this is what Boise's talking about. Happy Friday, all. Joining me today is Blake Hunter, our Hey Boise newsletter editor. Thanks so much for being here today, Blake.
Hey, Lindsay. Happy Friday.
Happy Friday to you, too. So something I'm really excited to talk with you about, or I'm really excited to pick your brain, is the Atkins v. State of Idaho case. And for anyone who's not familiar, that's the case where 4 women who had some pretty major health issues with their pregnancies were unable to get abortions that their healthcare providers thought were medically necessary. So they're suing the state of Idaho because of that, because of how the state's abortion ban laws affected them. And there's finally some movement in the case. It's being argued in the 4th District Court in front of Judge Jason Scott. Blake, what are you really looking at in this trial, or what has stood out to you already after the testimonies of these women?
Yeah, I think a lot of what stands out, especially from the opening arguments, is just how emotionally intense and traumatic the recountings of these stories have been. So again, these are people who had severe pregnancy complications in Idaho, and whether or not they, immediately knew that they had to travel out of state or decided that it was not worth the risk to essentially stay in Idaho long enough for their health to deteriorate to the point that a doctor felt comfortable giving them an abortion, they decided to travel out of state for abortion care. And so these are really difficult. It's very intense. They are describing very traumatic processes. One of them, multiple of them, but one of them especially said the 4 days that I spent traveling and calling clinics out of state while my husband stayed home with our other child were the 4 worst days of my life, right?
Yeah.
And a lot of accounts are starting with the story of one woman who, traveled to Portland with her family. They got a hotel, which we can talk about all the costs that come with this too, while healthcare is already so expensive. And she talked about having an abortion while her child is in the other room.
Yeah, I can't even imagine. I've given birth 3 times. I cannot imagine being in that scenario with a wall dividing you from your toddler.
Yeah. In a hotel.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so that's obviously, I think, probably to everyone, what stands out most in the opening arguments. This started on Monday, and it's supposed to wrap up late next week. But yeah, I think that the defense in this case put together this group of women, I think, as kind of a strategy, because these are women who have mostly, I believe, all had children before or wanted to be pregnant and to carry their pregnancies to term, but weren't able to because of severe complications. And they're essentially arguing that the state's abortion ban is unconstitutional, and it infringes upon their rights to essentially pursue life, liberty, pursuit of happiness is kind of the area that we're talking about here. And so that's the first thing that stood out to me. The second thing that stood out to me, which I really want to get your thoughts on this, and I assume that you have thoughts on this, is the state's lack of nuance / I'll say it, effort in their arguments. I think that from what I've seen, and I've only listened to one of the part of one of the day's hearings, but the state really just seems to be saying these women don't have any constitutional standing in saying that there's a right to abortion in Idaho, which that's certainly up for interpretation. But the state is just saying every abortion is a death. Every abortion is a murder. So I believe that the state called these situations hypothetical and theoretical, and saying that these women are talking about things that might happen. And they're literally right in front of these attorneys describing what did happen. They're not talking about things that might happen. We were talking about things that might happen 2 years ago. This stuff's already happening. And so people are already having to travel out of state for this care. And that's what this lawsuit is about. So I don't know. I felt like the state just didn't bring its best effort. And I don't know. I don't know what you think about that as like the state's overall strategy for this. Of course, the fight against abortion is like a nationwide strategy. So of course there is a lot of complexity to it. But I was just wondering what you thought about the state so far this week in court.
I have so many thoughts. Like as you alluded to, I have many thoughts. Thoughts as a woman, thoughts as a person who's been pregnant, thoughts as a nurse. I don't know if it's that the state lacks effort or the state lacks understanding of the medical implications of this, because a lot of the same arguments they're making in this trial are the arguments that they made in front of the Supreme Court about the EMTALA case, which leads me to believe they don't understand medical nuance or complexity, or their position requires them to not understand that.
I was going to say, where does this become weaponized incompetence?
And that's kind of what I'm seeing, where I don't know if it's an accident anymore. It can't be that they haven't consulted with a doctor. At this point, unless that becomes a level of, legal malpractice. So an issue I have is these women are talking about pregnancy things that happen. They just do. A fetus will develop without certain body parts that you absolutely need to survive. They will develop, major complications that now impact the health of the person who is pregnant. And in those situations, according to their providers, according to, the standard medical knowledge and practice in this country, the appropriate treatment is abortion.
Right.
And while these women were describing these very heartbreaking stories of what they were facing, with I believe every single one of them, it was a wanted pregnancy.
Yeah.
And I don't think that matters in your access to healthcare, but I do think that paints a very interesting picture considering how the state has portrayed abortion and abortion care. And so they're talking about their health is in danger. They might lose their fertility, and the Idaho lawyers are arguing, well, if we let people get abortions because they might lose their fertility, then what happens if they step on a rusty nail? They'll just probably go get an abortion because their health is at risk. Like, they go to these wild hyperbolic scenarios where it's like a woman had a bad day, so she'll just get an abortion. She gets a cold, so she has an abortion, ignoring these incredibly serious scenarios that are life-threatening, health-threatening, fertility-threatening. Or, in other instances, another way to look at it, one of these women needed an abortion 2 days after the Idaho abortion ban went into effect. So 3 days earlier, she would have been able to get that care in her home state with her insurance to help with the coverage, surrounded by her family, surrounded by providers that care about her, that she has a relationship with. And so that whole situation was materially changed because of the Idaho abortion ban. She was heavily impacted by that. The state's arguments are so ridiculous. And so, what if a woman has a mental health crisis? She'll probably just go to the ER and try to get an abortion. And it completely disregarding the nuance of the situation. And with this case, two of the people also involved in it are actually doctors. Yeah. And they have discussed, particularly Dr. Emily Corrigan has discussed that the laws as they currently stand don't have medical language. So it's a lot of legal jargon that has no standard in medical care. A physician's best judgment, to the best of their ability. Those aren't the evidence-based standards of practice in medicine. We don't edge death. That's not really what anybody's doing. And so these doctors are facing criminal charges potentially, while they're trying to balance what is good for their patient, what is good for the pregnancy, what is good for the family, and, are they close to death? What does close to death mean?
Right.
I believe at this point it does feel like weaponized incompetence to make these women sound hysterical. I'm curious from a non-medical perspective, or you haven't, practiced medicine before or been in healthcare. What does it look like to you?
In preparation for this conversation, I went back to a conversation that you had with State's newsroom reporter Kelsey Mosley Morris, who we are so lucky to be having, covering abortion. And it was a conversation that you had with her back in like July, I think, after the U.S. Supreme Court decided not to rule in Idaho's EMTALA case. And I had to go back because, like, for the past, since even before Dobbs really was overturned, it has really felt like this game of like chutes and ladders in Idaho of like following all of the abortion bans and then each of the lawsuits around the bans and going from different circuit courts and just all of the things. So I wanted to ask you, because this is something that Kelsey said, was that this was that the July Supreme Court decision was a safe decision for the court. So I'm wondering, applying that kind of metric, what do you feel like is a safe political choice for Judge Jason Scott now in Idaho, operating on this within our, very updated political context?
I think a safe decision would be to move it further in the courts, kind of a no decision made, no stake. I think similar to the Supreme Court, I think a punt is the safe decision, or even a let's let the legislature decide. We don't want to. There's been a lot of discussion in the judiciary branch of government of they don't want the judges deciding. They want this to be state decision of the voters. And so I think the safe decision would be to either punt it back to the legislature or move it higher up and say, like, this needs to go further up. I don't have, the ability to make a judgment on this based on this information, or I think a higher court should decide this.
Which I just want to jump in and say, that does make sense. Like, it's not a judge's law to legislate. Like, this is, by pretty much every metric, a bad law. So it makes sense that he doesn't want to, like, overly interpret it. So I see what you're saying there. But who's going to hold anything accountable?
I do think just my take for what would be maybe a groundbreaking decision or something more stark would be putting a stay to the law or saying that there needs to be health exceptions of some kind. I think that, again, that would become legislating from the bench, which there's positives and negatives to that.
Right.
I guess, depending on what side of the issue you're on this. And so, I mean, I'm very interested to see what that judgment will look like, because I do think with the election results for the state nationally, I'm going to guess the decision will be very safe. And we're supposed to, the trial's scheduled to end November 21st. So especially heading into the holidays, things like that, I just don't see there being much movement in this right now. But potentially it will be moved to a higher court. Blake, there have been some interesting developments with the Capital City Development Corps, who were doing that development that maybe the most well-known aspect of it was going to be the new YMCA, but there was also supposed to be housing. There was supposed to be shopping. It was supposed to be quite this widespread development. And it looks like besides the YMCA, it's all gone. But things have already been demolished. What do you think this will mean for Boise in the future for downtown development?
Yeah, this is such a tricky question. I think that, so what we're talking about here is like CCDC had proposed this, two buildings. There's like a 7-story building and a 15-story building, which was originally 20. And the YMCA, which is like $80 million, and then a few other smaller buildings in the kind of vicinity around like State Street and 10th and 11th. So the YMCA is just going to like basically move across State Street, which I'm really excited for. I think that that's going to be an incredible new hub. I love the Y, but like it really does need an upgrade. Like, and there've been multiple reports that have shown like it's just, it doesn't have the capacity to serve the needs that the community wants it to serve. So I'm really excited that that is continuing. But, these other buildings were supposed to, provide a bunch of workforce housing. So had, rents capped at like 30% of the people's incomes who were going to live there. And they were making between 80 and I think 120% of the area median income. And then there was like some senior living facilities, a mobility hub. so it was like very ambitious, and basically the developers just like couldn't raise the money. And CCDC doesn't seem to be you know holding that against them. And it's been a tough year for just like fundraising kind of across the board, I feel like. I really hope that something gets proposed soon, because like you said, now there's just like this vacant little area that, some old buildings were cleared, were already demolished for this. And obviously we need more housing. But I hope that something really creative gets pitched here soon. And whenever something kind of falls through like this in Boise, especially after it feels like the craze of people moving here and home prices and everything just like skyrocketing all the time, especially now that feels like it's settled down a little bit. Whenever a project like this kind of falls through, I always get like this little anxious bug in the back of my mind that's like, oh, is this the next Boise hole? Like from like the 70s to like the 90s,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? Like, is this like kind of the bubble bursting and nobody's going to want to do anything with this property? And I don't know. It just like awakens those kinds of fears in my mind. I don't think that's going to be the case with this. I think, CCDC still owns some of this property. I'm not totally sure who's got their hands on the rest of it, but like I think that stuff will be planned here. I just hope that it's similarly ambitious to the original plan, because I think it's a really cool area of downtown. We've seen downtown expand westward, and so I hope that we can continue to see that happening. It's right next to the 11th Street Bikeway now. State Streets kind of have so much developed. The YMCA will be there, so I don't know. I hope that something creative and very dynamic does get proposed here, and please, please let it be at affordable rates.
Yes. Oh, we absolutely desperately needed that affordable housing. Something I'm really interested in getting your perspective on is so many reasons were cited for why this project kind of just fell apart. High interest rates, expensive construction costs, but specifically they cited the labor shortages caused by Micron's $15 billion Boise expansion and
Yeah.
Meta's $1 billion Facebook data center in Cuna.
Yep.
I know there was a lot of momentum. There was, talking about it's going to bring jobs to the area. It's going to be so good for the area. It looks like potentially there's some unintended consequences. Do you think there needs to be more judiciousness when it comes to these expansions and how they might affect Boise?
Yeah, it's so difficult because these huge corporations, like Americans, we've been learning this for centuries. Like, when these huge corporations are able to say, like, we're going to bring jobs like this, especially like non-unionized jobs, and it's going to be such a good thing for your community. I mean, you're seeing the same thing in Amazon and Nampa. And yes, it gives people paychecks, and it funnels money away from other stuff. Like it just does. It funnels attention, it funnels energy, it funnels resources away from more local developments. And frankly, it just funnels more money into hands of billionaires who frankly do not have our community's best interests in mind. So yeah, absolutely, I think we do. And a lot of people really warned over the last few years when Meta and when Micron were planning these huge expansions. They said, this is going to drive up costs for construction, for labor, which, yes, please pay labor more, but it's gonna funnel all of these resources away from other smaller projects, and we're seeing that play out.
Okay, Blake, those were some heavy topics. It seems like sometimes our Friday news just gets real heavy.
It's been a tough November so far.
Yeah. We're all fighting through. So I'm really curious to hear about your pick of the week. Mine is definitely a little bit of escapism, a little bit of holiday cheer. But I think it's time for that. I think that's okay. I'm going to be heading to the 43rd annual Holiday Bazaar, and that's at the Senior Center in Boise off Robbins Road. And I haven't been before, but I've had several friends say this is the holiday market bazaar to attend, that this one is really, really just always well done, really great. I'm excited to, spend my weekend looking for presents, prepping for the holidays. It's going from 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. on November 16th. And so I'm definitely, it's been heavy. I'm ready to escape a little bit and look forward to the holidays and maybe think about others, focus on others. What can I get others? What can I do as maybe a gift or support some local small businesses? Get outside of my head for a minute and stop doom scrolling.
Yeah, we all have to be doing that. I love that. I have never been to Boise's senior center, so I'm so curious. My impression of senior centers is from like Hazleton, Idaho, where it's like, you go for chili on Tuesdays. So I'm curious to see how that goes. It seems really fun though.
I know. Yeah, it seems they have like a thrift store, so I'm excited to look through that. I'm always a girl looking for a bargain. They're going to have hot cocoa, popcorn,
we love it. Wow.
Entice me
Sounds
with
great.
snacks.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
I'm very excited.
We're very like holiday event season, and I'm very grateful. Every weekend there's something going on, so it's exciting.
Yes. Yeah, I am glad to have that after the election. So what's your pick of the week?
My pick of the week is I've talked about them on the podcast, I think, before, and I know that you're familiar with the Lit Room in Garden City, an independent local bookstore, just started and run by absolutely incredible folks who I adore, and they're upgrading. They are moving to the big times, and they have bought a new space in Garden City, a new building along Chinden, so that they're going to get a larger space. If you've been to the Lit Room, it's small, and they pack a punch with what they do in there. But it is small, and so they're upgrading their size, and also starting a new, it's kind of rebranding. And so it's going to be called Old Speak Bar, and they're collaborating kind of a bookstore into like an ale house with alliteration ales. And I'm just obsessed with the folks behind this. I think that like they're really on the ground, like doing what we need to be doing in Boise right now. And so I'm just grateful for them, and they just started crowdfunding. And so I just want to point people to them as something to support. Just in general, go to independent bookstores. We vote with your dollar. And so check out Old Speak. I'm really excited about this. It's not going to open until next year, but go support the Lit Room just in general.
Yeah. Oh, I am so excited. I was there when they announced this on a First Friday, and I am so excited. They are tapped into what Boise needs. I want to have a delicious beer and read a banned book. That's what I want. That's what I want out of my bookstore, and they're giving it to me. They're giving the people what they want.
Did you get one of their little matchbooks? This is kind of off topic, but they made little matchbooks that they like engraved with Old Speak. Did you get one of those?
Yes. Oh, okay, absolutely. Good. Yep. Okay, I've got it. Yeah, I've got it tucked away. I'm like, that's an heirloom.
It
Pass
really
that
is.
down.
It's like, this is going to be Boise like lore someday. So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. When I'm in the senior center, I can be like, here's my matchbook from Old
I'm going to use
Speak.
my last match. Yeah.
Yeah. I was there when they announced it.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Blake. This has been a great weekly news breakdown. Thank you so much for joining me, and I really appreciate your perspective on these topics.
Yeah, thank you, Lindsay. You too.
That's all for today here on CityCast Boise. The show is produced by Evelyn Avitia, Frankie Barnhill, and me, Lindsay Van Allen. Blake Hunter writes our Hey Boise newsletter with help from Adrian Gonzalez this week. Our music is by the local band Up Is the Down Is the. If you enjoyed our show today, leave us a review. It helps other people find us. We'll be back on Monday to dive into what's going on with so many public defenders leaving their practice. Catch you then.